The aroma of stale coffee, usually a comfort, now clung to the air like a shroud, heavy and foreboding. It was a Tuesday afternoon, a day that promised nothing but the mundane hum of an office nearing its end. Yet, as I sat across the polished, unforgiving surface of Eleanor Vance's mahogany desk, a chill, colder than any late autumn draft, began to seep into my bones. The crisp, official envelope resting between us seemed to pulse with an unseen energy, a silent prelude to the storm that was about to break. My heart, a seasoned percussionist in the symphony of my life, maintained a steady, almost imperceptible rhythm. But beneath that composure, a deep, resonant chord of instinct began to vibrate, warning me that the rules of engagement were about to change, irrevocably and profoundly. For 14 years, I had built a career, brick by painstaking brick, within the walls of this company, a place I once considered a second home. For 12 of those years, it had been a crucible of passion, innovation, and genuine camaraderie. I had joined just 3 months after its inception, witnessing its hesitant first steps, its steady growth, and finally, its confident stride into a niche market. My role was multifaceted, an intricate dance between the tactile world of specialized product delivery and the nuanced art of human connection. The core of my contribution, the very sinew of my professional identity, lay in the field. This was where the magic happened, where our bespoke solutions, intricate and highly specialized, came to life in the hands of our clients. Imagine, if you will, the delicate calibration of a complex medical diagnostic system, or the intuitive integration of advanced software into a sprawling, multinational network. Our products were not commodities. They were tailored experiences, demanding a fusion of technical mastery and empathetic communication. I would travel, often great distances, sometimes across continents, to sit face-to-face with customers, to understand their intricate needs, to translate their abstract visions into tangible, high-performing realities. We were never the cheapest option. Our pricing reflected the meticulous craftsmanship, the advanced research, and the unparalleled dedication we poured into every project. But we were, undeniably, the superior choice. And I, through a blend of technical acumen, relentless perfectionism, and a uniquely personable style, had become the company's most celebrated artisan. I remember countless occasions, perched in the hushed intensity of a client's boardroom or the sterile efficiency of a research lab, explaining concepts that bristled with complexity. My ability to distill intricate information into digestible, actionable insights, to bridge the chasm between specialist jargon and client comprehension, was not merely a skill, it was an art form. Customers consistently lauded my approach, my patient explanations, my unwavering commitment to their vision. This wasn't just about making a sale, it was about forging a partnership. The result was a cascading waterfall of repeat business and an enviable torrent of new referrals, clients reaching out, voices laced with conviction, declaring, "You must work with him. He understands." At one point, my reputation had even transcended the commercial sphere, leading to invitations to guest lecture at a prestigious university, teaching aspiring medical professionals how to communicate complex diagnoses with clarity and compassion to those without a scientific background. I took immense pride in this work, in the quiet satisfaction of a project perfectly executed, a client genuinely delighted. The second facet of my role, the office-bound component, was a different beast altogether. My aversion to cold calling, to the relentless, often thankless pursuit of leads found in the dusty pages of a phone book, was a known entity within the company. It was a chore that grated against my nature, a sterile exercise in persuasion that felt fundamentally alien to my collaborative spirit. However, when the tables turned, when a potential customer, intrigued by our reputation, initiated contact, my demeanor shifted. I was articulate, informed, capable of transforming a hesitant inquiry into a firm commitment. My weakness, therefore, was not in communication itself, but in the initiation of such encounters when the connection felt artificial, forced. Recognizing this, my role within the office naturally evolved. I was rarely, if ever, asked to embark on those soul-crushing cold calls. Instead, my talents were redirected towards areas where they could flourish. I would meticulously prepare product specifications, designing innovative solutions that anticipated future client needs. A significant portion of my time became dedicated to training new staff members, patiently guiding them through the intricate methodologies, instilling in them the same dedication to quality that had become my hallmark. I became the de facto problem solver, the quiet sentinel who could be counted on to untangle the most Gordian knots, whether they involved a technical glitch or an unforeseen logistical challenge. And when illness or unforeseen circumstances thinned our ranks, I was the first to step into the breach, to ensure continuity, to uphold the company's unwavering standard of excellence. During those formative years, the owner, a visionary and a mentor, fostered an environment of mutual respect and shared purpose. His manager, a pragmatic and supportive woman, facilitated our efforts with grace and efficiency. The entire staff, a mosaic of diverse talents, coalesced into a cohesive unit. It was, in every sense of the word, a fulfilling career, a place where my skills were not just utilized but celebrated. My compensation, a decent salary that steadily increased with my contributions, and the company's expansion, reflected this value. It was not a king's ransom, but it was fair, allowing me a comfortable life, free from the gnawing anxieties of financial instability. Then, the first tremor. After 12 years of relentless expansion, the owner made a strategic decision to divest a portion of the company. Specifically, he chose to sell the segment that encompassed my local office. He approached me with a sincere regret, expressing his earnest desire for me to remain under his employ. However, this would necessitate a dramatic shift, either a full relocation to a different city, uprooting my established life, or an exponential increase in my daily commute, transforming what was once a reasonable journey into a grueling, time-consuming odyssey. The alternative, the path I ultimately chose, was to remain rooted in my current office, but under the banner of a new proprietor. It was a choice born of practicality, a desire to maintain the familiar rhythms of my life, though a quiet unease, a premonition of change, stirred beneath the surface. Before the official transfer of ownership, before any of us were privy to the seismic shift awaiting us, the prospective buyer spent several weeks embedded within our operations. Her name was Eleanor Vance, and she presented herself as merely another employee, shadowing our team, ostensibly absorbing the intricacies of our daily routines. She was a woman of precise, almost surgical demeanor, with eyes that seemed to constantly calculate, evaluate, and, at times, dissect. She accompanied me on numerous field assignments, observing firsthand the precise choreography of my work, the effortless rapport I cultivated with clients, the meticulous attention to detail that defined my product delivery. She saw the accolades, she heard the unsolicited praise from customers, she witnessed the tangible impact of my expertise. I remember one specific instance, a particularly complex installation for a discerning client, where my ability to foresee and preempt a potential technical conflict saved the project from significant delays and cost overruns. She was there, watching, silent, yet I felt the weight of her scrutiny, a silent acknowledgement of my value. Or so I thought. The announcement of the sale landed with the force of a sudden clap of thunder. Eleanor Vance, the quiet observer, was to become our new owner. A collective gasp rippled through the office, a mixture of surprise and apprehension. Her ascension was immediate, and her managerial style, starkly contrasted with the previous owner's collaborative approach, began to manifest itself with chilling speed. The manager, a woman whose wisdom and experience had been a cornerstone of our success, made a swift, decisive departure, opting to forge her own path rather than bend to the new regime. Her resignation was a stark symbol, a bell tolling the end of an era. Then came the systematic purge. A wave of layoffs swept through the office, excising swathes of the experienced, well-compensated staff. The familiar faces, the anchors of institutional knowledge, vanished one by one. The secretary, a fixture of the office for years, was replaced. Most of those who had attained a decent salary, who had invested years in honing their craft and contributing to the company's growth, were summarily dismissed. The insidious flexibility of zero-hours contracts, a financial leverage point for the new owner, provided the legal mechanism for these mass displacements. I, along with a handful of newer hires who were still on the lowest wage tiers, remained. My survival, I suspected, was not a testament to Eleanor's appreciation, but rather to the indispensable, immediate need for my unique skill set, a skill set she couldn't simply conjure from the ether. To the outside world, to our loyal customer base, the transition was designed to be seamless, almost imperceptible. The company retained its familiar trading name, its established brand identity. The only substantive change, a bureaucratic detail hidden beneath layers of corporate rebranding, was the alteration of the registered business name. For our customers, it was the same reliable entity, the same trusted service. They believed nothing had truly changed. They were, in the starkest possible terms, profoundly mistaken. My immediate mandate under Eleanor's stewardship was to train the skeletal crew of remaining staff, to rapidly imbue them with the knowledge and capabilities of the experienced employees who had been summarily jettisoned. It was a Sisyphean task, an attempt to replicate years of cumulative expertise in a matter of months. During this period, I recommended 2 individuals, both of whom I had worked with previously, both possessing the raw talent and dedication required for the demanding work. One was a close friend, recently returned from a year of travel, keen to re-establish himself. The other was my girlfriend, whose schedule, dictated by her work in a school, allowed her to contribute significantly during holiday periods. I presented their qualifications with complete transparency to Eleanor, disclosing the nature of my relationships. She granted them interviews, presumably recognizing the immediate need for competent hands, and subsequently hired them. Over the next 2 years, the insidious rot began to spread. Eleanor Vance, in her relentless pursuit of maximizing profit, initiated a series of short-sighted, self-destructive policies. Prices for our bespoke solutions began to climb, steadily and noticeably. Simultaneously, the quality of our product, once the bedrock of our reputation, began to erode. It was a calculated gamble, a desperate attempt to squeeze more revenue from a shrinking pie. For new customers, those unfamiliar with our legacy of excellence, the changes were not immediately apparent. They simply perceived our services as expensive, their expectations tempered by the less than stellar quality they received. But for our long-standing clients, those who had partnered with us for a decade or more, the contrast was immediate and glaring. They were being asked to pay more for demonstrably inferior results. The betrayal was palpable. Their exodus was swift and devastating. 95% of our old customers, the very foundation of our sustained success, abandoned us. The complaints, once a rarity, became a deluge, a relentless cascade of dissatisfaction. New customers, those who wandered into our orbit, rarely, if ever, evolved into repeat clients. The lifeblood of the company, the recurring revenue stream, began to wither. Concurrently, the internal hemorrhaging continued unabated. The staff turnover rate, already alarmingly high, reached epidemic proportions. The new hires, drawn by the initial promise, quickly realized the harsh reality. The minimum wage they were being paid was a paltry sum for the demanding nature of the work, for the constant barrage of customer dissatisfaction, for the palpable lack of respect from the ownership. Under the old regime, new employees could expect an hourly wage approximately 2.5 times the minimum, a compensation that fostered loyalty, engagement, and a genuine desire to excel. Under Eleanor, that incentive had evaporated. My girlfriend, disheartened by the toxic atmosphere and the diminishing returns of her efforts, eventually quit. My friend, though remaining, was actively seeking greener pastures, his patience worn thin by the escalating dysfunction. The company, once a beacon of quality, was now a sinking ship, its hull breached by avarice and short-sightedness. And I, the last remaining vestige of its former glory, found myself adrift in its decaying interior. The call came mid-afternoon, its tone clipped, urgent. It was Eleanor, her voice devoid of pleasantries, demanding my immediate return to the office. The request was not merely unexpected, it was logistically absurd. I had just concluded a demanding on-site assignment with a client, securing a positive outcome despite the deteriorating product quality. My next appointment, another critical delivery, was scheduled in 2.5 hours, a 30-minute drive away in the opposite direction. The office, a crucible of impending confrontation, lay an hour and 10 minutes from both my current location and my next destination. A detour to the office would mean, At best, a 5-minute window before I would need to turn around and race back to my next client. My mileage, a standard contractual provision, was compensated above my regular salary, meaning this unproductive journey would incur additional, unnecessary costs for the company. More importantly, parking at the second client's location was notoriously challenging. My plan, carefully considered, was to arrive early, secure a coveted spot, and dedicate the interim to quiet contemplation, perhaps losing myself in the pages of a book. My manager, now Eleanor herself, dismissed these rational considerations. She insisted, with an unyielding finality, that my presence was absolutely required. I complied. The journey back was tinged with a creeping sense of dread, the familiar roads transformed into a tunnel leading to an unknown fate. Upon arrival, the office, usually a hive of activity, felt eerily still, the fluorescent lights casting a harsh, unforgiving glow. Eleanor, seated at her desk, presented me with an official letter, its crisp edges almost accusatory. It was a formal notification of a disciplinary meeting, slated to occur in a few days' time. The letter, a cold, impersonal decree, also informed me of my right to bring a witness if I so desired. The shock was a physical blow, a sudden emptying of breath. 14 years. A spotless record. Rave reviews. Unquestionable dedication. And now, a disciplinary meeting. It rattled me, for a brief, disorienting moment. But then, the quiet analytical part of my mind, the part that dissected complex problems and forged elegant solutions, began to stir. I read through her litany of complaints, each point a carefully constructed accusation designed to undermine my professional standing. The list, when viewed dispassionately, was flimsy, riddled with half-truths and outright fabrications. A cold resolve began to coalesce within me. This was not a disciplinary action, it was a calculated assault. And I would prepare my defense with the same meticulous precision I applied to every aspect of my professional life. Days later, the appointed time arrived. I entered the meeting room, a sterile space usually reserved for client presentations, now repurposed as an arena for corporate combat. Eleanor was already seated, her face a mask of strained formality, an almost imperceptible tremor in her hands betraying the performance. Beside her sat a woman I recognized as her friend, a recent hire from her yoga class, a replacement for the long-serving secretary she had summarily dismissed. This woman, her chosen witness, had no genuine understanding of my work, no historical context for my contributions. She was merely a prop, a silent affirmation of Eleanor's authority. I had weighed the option of bringing my own witness, perhaps the office assistant who had become a trusted confidant, or even my friend who had worked alongside me for years. But I declined. My strategy was different. I understood the environment I was stepping into, a kangaroo court designed to legitimize a predetermined outcome. My witness would be unseen, unheard by them, but utterly irrefutable. Tucked discreetly into my breast pocket, my smartphone was silently recording every syllable, every inflection, every pregnant pause. In my jurisdiction, such unilateral recording was perfectly legal, requiring no consent from the other parties involved. It was my silent weapon, my shield against distortion, my immutable record of the truth. Eleanor began, her voice a carefully modulated monotone, ticking off her list of grievances. Each point was delivered with the air of an unassailable indictment. But with each accusation, my internal response was one of quiet, methodical dismantling. She started with the seemingly innocuous, the easily refutable. You were unavailable to work for a week in August. My reply was immediate, calm, and factual. That would be the week I booked a pre-approved annual leave. I submitted the request form well in advance, and it was signed off by the previous manager several months before your takeover. It was to attend my cousin's wedding on the other side of the country, an event I had planned to combine with a short holiday. I paused, letting the simple truth hang in the air, underscoring the absurdity of the complaint. Eleanor's witness shifted uncomfortably. She pressed on, attempting to introduce trivial infractions as evidence of chronic unreliability. You were late for work on the 12th of May. I maintained my steady gaze. Is that the specific day, Eleanor, when my car broke down on the motorway, and I immediately called the office to inform them of the unavoidable delay? She hesitated, her composure momentarily faltering. I wouldn't know the exact circumstances. I do, I replied, a subtle but firm edge to my voice. I reached into my bag, retrieving a meticulously organized folder. Here is the receipt from the breakdown service, clearly dated May 12th. A simple cross-reference with the office log would have confirmed my call. I presented the receipt, placing it carefully on the table. The silence that followed was thick, punctuated only by the subtle rustle of paper as Eleanor's yoga friend discreetly nudged the document towards her. Then came the centerpiece of her fabrication, the accusation she clearly considered her most potent weapon, a charge of gross misconduct, alleging that I had breached fundamental health and safety regulations in the specific manner of delivering our product to a customer. This was not merely weak or pathetic, it was an outright, malicious lie designed to strip away my professional integrity. The specific technique she referenced, a specialized maneuver critical to the secure installation of our complex systems, was one I had perfected over a decade. It was a method I had repeatedly demonstrated in her presence during her initial shadowing period, a method she had observed without a single word of concern. Indeed, it was a fundamental aspect of the training protocol I had established, a method I had personally taught to countless new staff members under her very nose, all without ever once being deemed an issue. My blood ran cold at the audacity, but my external demeanor remained perfectly unruffled. Eleanor, I began, my voice measured, almost clinical. The method you're referring to, the specific delivery technique, is one that has been standard practice in this company for over 10 years. It is precisely engineered to ensure both the integrity of our delicate product and the safety of the installation environment. You yourself observed me executing this very procedure on no fewer than 5 separate occasions during your initial orientation. Furthermore, it forms a core module of the training program I developed, a program that you approved, and one in which I have personally instructed every new hire, including those you brought on board. To suggest it constitutes gross misconduct is not only factually incorrect, but undermines the very safety protocols that have been meticulously refined and approved by this company's leadership for over a decade. Could you specify which exact regulation you believe I violated, and precisely how my standard operating procedure deviates from it? She stammered, visibly flustered, unable to articulate a specific violation, resorting instead to vague generalities about new directives and updated standards that had never been communicated, let alone formally implemented. The silence that followed was heavy with her discomfort, the weight of her deceit now pressing down upon her. With her flimsy accusations exhausted, Eleanor shifted tactics, her voice adopting a falsely conciliatory tone. She declared, with a practiced sigh, that she truly didn't want to lose me. However, she simply couldn't justify retaining such a poor employee at my current salary. The implication was clear. My professional worth, after 14 years of demonstrable excellence, had somehow evaporated under her ownership. She then presented her ultimatum, 2 stark choices laid out like cold stones. I could either sign a 0-hours contract, relinquishing the stability and security of my long-standing agreement, and accept employment at minimum wage, or she would fire me, offering a paltry 2 weeks' notice. My response was immediate, calm, and rooted in an unwavering understanding of my rights. Eleanor, I stated, my voice cutting through her manufactured magnanimity. My contract explicitly guarantees me 1 week's notice for every year of employment. Given my continuous service, that amounts to 12 weeks' notice, the maximum legally stipulated. Your offer of 2 weeks is insufficient. She bristled, her mask of composure beginning to crack. You've only been my employee for 2 years, she retorted, her voice hardening. Before that, you worked for the previous owner. The company changed hands. That is a fundamental misinterpretation of employment law regarding business takeovers. I corrected her, my tone devoid of emotion, purely factual. Under the Transfer of Undertakings, Protection of Employment, Regulations, or TUP, my employment is considered continuous. The identity of the employer changed, but the undertaking itself, the business, continued. Therefore, my accumulated years of service are preserved. I am confident that a quick consultation with your legal counsel would confirm that Section 1, Paragraph 3, Subsection A, of the TUP regulations combined with the relevant case law regarding economic, technical, or organizational reasons for dismissal, unequivocally supports my claim to the full 12 weeks. The confidence in my voice, the precise citation of the law, caught her off guard. A flicker of genuine panic crossed her features. She immediately called for a 30-minute break in the meeting, ostensibly to allow me time to think about her offer. I knew precisely what she was doing. She was calling her lawyer an expensive, desperate attempt to validate her flawed legal assessment. I merely nodded, a quiet affirmation of her transparent maneuver, and settled back in my chair, allowing a faint, almost imperceptible smile to touch my lips. The recording device in my pocket continued its faithful vigil, capturing every strained silence, every nervous intake of breath. When Eleanor returned, her demeanor had shifted subtly. The bravado had receded, replaced by a brittle authority. Her lawyer, I surmised, had confirmed my assertion regarding continuous employment. However, Eleanor, unwilling to concede complete defeat, had clearly been advised of a different, more aggressive tactic. "My counsel informs me," she began, her voice strained, "that if I am to dismiss you for gross misconduct, then I am not obligated to provide any notice period whatsoever. However," she continued, attempting to project an air of magnanimity, "because I am a reasonable person, I am still willing to offer you 2 weeks' notice." She presented the option of signing the 0-hours contract as an immediate alternative, implying that refusal would trigger the gross misconduct dismissal. My mind raced, not in panic, but in calculated assessment. The mention of gross misconduct was a clumsy attempt to regain leverage, but it revealed a deeper, more immediate desperation. I knew, with absolute certainty, why she suddenly needed me for those 2 weeks. One of our few remaining high-value customers, a notoriously demanding but highly profitable client, was scheduled for a critical product delivery within that exact time frame. This particular client had a unique, almost proprietary relationship with me. On several occasions, Eleanor had attempted to dispatch other staff members in my stead, only for the efforts to result in problems, delays, or outright rejections. It was not a reflection on the competence of my colleagues. It was simply the intricate nature of that specific client's requirements, a bespoke solution that demanded my unique touch, my intimate understanding of their operational nuances. They would only work with me. Losing that account would be a devastating blow to her already floundering business. "I appreciate your consideration," I said, my voice betraying nothing of the strategic maelstrom within me. "This is a significant decision. I would require a couple of hours to return home and consider your revised offer thoroughly." She, seeing a fleeting opportunity to secure my presence for those critical 2 weeks, readily granted my request. My exit from the meeting room was as quiet and unassuming as my entrance, leaving behind the lingering scent of her desperation. The drive home was a blur of focused thought, each turn of the wheel mirroring a pivot in my strategy. I called the office, my voice calm, resolute. When Eleanor answered, I stated my decision without preamble. "Eleanor, I have considered your offer. I must decline the proposal of a 0-hours contract and will therefore be leaving the company." A perceptible tension in her voice. "Very well," she responded, attempting to regain control. "Then I am formally giving you your 2 weeks' notice, effective immediately." This was the moment. The kill switch. "Eleanor," I interjected, my voice cutting through her pronouncement with quiet authority. "I'm afraid I must decline your offer of 2 weeks' notice as well." A moment of stunned silence on the line. Then, her voice, laced with bewilderment and a rising note of panic. "What do you mean you decline? You can't just decline notice. Consider the implications, Eleanor," I continued, pressing the advantage. "You have formally accused me of gross misconduct, a serious charge implying a fundamental breach of safety and professional standards. If that accusation holds true, then surely I cannot be considered reliable, let alone safe, to deliver our highly specialized product, especially to a critical client. Indeed, allowing me to continue to perform my duties, even for 2 weeks, would place the company at significant risk of liability should any issue arise. Therefore, for the good of the company, and to protect its reputation, I believe it would be in everyone's best interest if I did not return to work at all. It would be best if my employment terminated immediately. The silence on her end stretched, heavy with her dawning realization. I could almost hear the frantic calculations in her mind, the image of that crucial client account slipping through her grasp. "No," she exclaimed, her voice cracking with unconcealed desperation. "No. You have to be here for those 2 weeks. I need you." "I am merely thinking of what's best for the company, Eleanor," I replied, feigning a magnanimous concern. "After all, you cannot have unsafe staff delivering your product to your customers, particularly after an accusation of gross misconduct. It simply wouldn't be prudent." I paused, letting her desperation simmer. "However," I continued, injecting a calculated hint of possibility into my tone, "if you were to reconsider your accusation of gross misconduct and acknowledge that it was, in fact, an unfounded claim, then I would be willing to work my full 12 weeks' notice, as per my original contract. Those are your options, Eleanor. 0 weeks, based on your claim of gross misconduct, or the full 12 weeks, based on a retraction of that claim. The choice, ultimately, is yours." The silence returned, even longer this time, punctuated by what I imagined were the frantic whirrings of her overwhelmed mind. She was caught, trapped by her own deceit, impaled on the horns of a dilemma she had meticulously constructed. To concede that gross misconduct was to admit she had lied, weakening any future legal defense. But to insist on it was to lose the invaluable service of the only person capable of securing her most crucial client. The cost-benefit analysis was stark. In the end, avarice, combined with immediate necessity, triumphed over pride. Her voice, when it finally returned, was clipped, tight with suppressed fury. "Fine," she spat. 12 weeks. You work your 12 weeks. "Excellent," I said, my tone as calm as a summer lake. "I'll see you in the office tomorrow." The next 12 weeks were a masterclass in psychological warfare, a slow, methodical grind that solidified my conviction and deepened Eleanor's resentment. I returned to work the following day, a silent sentinel, my routine unchanged, my dedication undimmed. I worked precisely as I had for 14 years, with the same meticulous attention to detail, the same unwavering commitment to excellence. I did not coast. I did not slack. I did not, for a single moment, engage in the petty, vindictive behavior that was now Eleanor's defining characteristic. I was a professional, executing my duties with quiet dignity, building, brick by painstaking brick, the incontrovertible evidence of my unwavering performance. I continued to train the new staff, imparting my knowledge with the same patience and thoroughness. I continued to deliver our complex products, employing my personal, exceptional methods, garnering the same positive feedback from clients, even as Eleanor's policies drove the company further into decline. Every successful project, every satisfied customer interaction, became another invisible entry in my ledger, another irrefutable piece of evidence against her baseless accusations. Eleanor, for her part, barely spoke to me. Her resentment was a palpable presence, a suffocating cloud that hung between us. She bristled at my quiet confidence, at my refusal to be cowed by her lies, at my undeniable legal acumen. Her pettiness, a festering wound of bruised ego, began to manifest in increasingly transparent ways. One morning, I found my favorite ceramic mug, a gift from a former client, shattered in the kitchen sink, its pieces scattered carelessly. Eleanor was the only other person in the office at that early hour. The implied message was clear, a childish act of spite that only served to solidify my disdain. I simply bought a new mug, a quiet dismissal of her impotent rage. The most egregious act of exclusion, however, came towards the end of my notice period. Eleanor, in a transparent attempt to isolate and humiliate me, arranged a spa day for every member of the office staff. Every single person, from the newest hire to the seasoned assistant manager, received an invitation to a day of pampering and relaxation. Except me. Not only was I pointedly excluded, but I was also explicitly asked to work my scheduled day off, to answer the phones while the rest of the team indulged in their corporate-sponsored relaxation. The irony was not lost on me. I am, by nature and by physique, a man entirely uninterested in spa treatments. Had she offered me the invitation, I would have politely, perhaps even gratefully, declined, expressing my preference for other forms of leisure. But by deliberately, publicly excluding me, she achieved precisely the opposite of her intended effect. The entire team, arriving at the spa to find my absence glaring, immediately understood the nature of her petty malice. It backfired spectacularly, solidifying their sympathy for me and deepening their collective distrust of her. The quiet conversations, the sympathetic glances, the subtle shifts in their demeanor towards her were all observable to my keen eye. The office assistant, a kind and observant woman who had become a true friend, even expressed her deep discomfort and frustration, ensuring that I understood the full scope of Eleanor's cruelty. During these 12 weeks, while maintaining my professional facade, I was meticulously constructing the edifice of my legal revenge. Within days of Eleanor's reluctant concession, I had quietly contacted an employment law specialist. This lawyer, a sharp, formidable woman with a reputation for uncompromising advocacy, agreed to take my case on a no-win, no-fee basis. This was a critical piece of the puzzle, a financial lever that ensured I would not be bled dry by Eleanor's anticipated attempts to drag out legal proceedings. I spent hours, both during and after work, meticulously compiling every relevant document: my original contract, performance reviews from previous years, emails from satisfied clients, the official letter of disciplinary action, and most crucially, the audio recording of the entire meeting, which I had carefully transcribed. The lawyer guided me through the labyrinthine intricacies of unfair dismissal claims, outlining the strength of my case. The gross misconduct accusation, demonstrably false and later implicitly retracted by Eleanor herself, was a gaping vulnerability. Her attempt to force me onto a 0-hours contract at minimum wage, after years of salaried employment, constituted a clear case of constructive dismissal, a hostile change to the terms of employment designed to force resignation. The evidence, painstakingly gathered over years of quiet diligence and documented during Eleanor's reign, was overwhelming. Towards the final 2 weeks of my notice period, I dedicated significant time to training my friend, who had remained with the company despite his growing disillusionment. He was, effectively, to be my replacement, expected to shoulder the immense responsibilities of my former salaried position for a pittance. I poured all my knowledge into him, not just out of professional duty, but out of genuine care. I saw the struggle in his eyes, the dawning realization of the impossible expectations Eleanor was placing upon him. He absorbed everything, his respect for me deepening, his disdain for Eleanor solidifying. He knew, as I did, that this company was a slowly capsizing vessel. My final day arrived. After 14 years of unwavering dedication, 12 of which had been instrumental in building the company from its nascent stages, Eleanor had planned absolutely nothing. Not a single card, not a perfunctory farewell, not even a token gesture of acknowledgement. It was a cold, calculated silence, a final attempt to diminish my impact, to erase my legacy. The office assistant, my friend, the one whose empathy shone brightest in that dimming environment, had secretly acquired a few small presents for me. She pressed them into my hands only after Eleanor had departed for the day, her eyes darting nervously, fearing reprisals for even this small act of kindness. The scene was a stark, poignant encapsulation of Eleanor Vance's toxic reign. I left the office that day, not with a sense of bitterness, but with a profound and quiet sense of vindication, the first phase of my plan meticulously executed. The very next day, the meticulously orchestrated trap began to spring. 2 things, independent yet intrinsically linked, unfolded with precise timing. The first was a phone call, not to me, but from my friend. He arrived at my doorstep mid-morning, when he should have been at the office, a weary but determined look on his face. He informed me, without preamble, that he had quit. Just like that. On a 0-hours contract, he was under no obligation to provide notice. He explained, his voice laced with indignation, that he could no longer tolerate Eleanor's treatment of me, nor could he abide by her expectation that he perform my extensive, previously salaried role for minimum wage. He had been a witness to her contempt, to the decline of the company, and his loyalty, strained to its breaking point, had finally snapped. His departure left Eleanor with an immediate, critical void, the very role she had desperately sought to fill with my continued presence. It was a quiet, almost poetic act of solidarity, and a devastating blow to her already fragile operational capacity. The second event, the true harbinger of Eleanor's impending ruin, arrived in the afternoon. A registered letter, bearing the official insignia of my lawyer's firm, was delivered to the office. It was addressed directly to Eleanor Vance, informing her, with stark legal precision, that I was initiating legal proceedings against her for unfair dismissal. I had meticulously arranged with my lawyer for this letter to be served the day after my official departure, a symbolic severing of ties, a clear demarcation between employee and adversary. According to the office assistant, my friend who had witnessed Eleanor's petty behavior, the letter's arrival triggered a dramatic and immediate collapse. She described Eleanor's face draining of all color, turning a ghastly shade of white. Then, a raw, primal sob escaped her, and she began to cry, openly and uncontrollably, before abruptly abandoning her desk and fleeing the office, presumably to make another frantic call to her increasingly expensive legal counsel. The sound of her despair, even secondhand, was a deeply satisfying note in the symphony of my burgeoning vindication. Eleanor, as predicted, refused to concede. She refuted my claims for unfair dismissal, stubbornly clinging to the crumbling edifice of her gross misconduct fabrication. In the subsequent weeks, through her lawyer, she attempted to concoct a fresh litany of reasons for my termination, grasping at straws, desperately trying to construct a narrative that would exonerate her. But the truth, stripped bare of her deceit, was chillingly simple. The company was hemorrhaging money, a direct consequence of her catastrophic business practices, and I, the highest paid, and indeed, the only remaining salaried employee, had become a perceived financial liability. My lawyer, a relentless advocate, patiently dismantled each of her counterarguments. We possessed an overwhelming mountain of evidence, years of pristine performance reviews, unsolicited testimonials from delighted customers, internal documents confirming my training roles and problem-solving contributions, and the irrefutable proof that her business was in a state of rapid decline. We had documented her deliberate attempts to force me onto a 0-hours contract, an act that directly contradicted her claim of gross misconduct. If I was so dangerous and incompetent, why would she wish to retain me, even at minimum wage? She initially attempted to deny this, a desperate gambit to maintain the illusion of legitimacy. But then, my lawyer delivered the coup de grace, a verbatim transcript of the entire disciplinary meeting, meticulously detailing every accusation, every one of my calm, evidence-based rebuttals, every one of her desperate lies, every one of her contradictory statements. And accompanying the transcript, the irrefutable audio recording itself. The moment her lawyer received that package, Eleanor Vance knew, with a sickening certainty, that she was irrevocably, utterly compromised. The mask of civic responsibility, the facade of legitimate authority, shattered into 1,000 irreparable pieces. Yet, despite the overwhelming evidence, despite the undeniable reality of her legal peril, Eleanor clung to her delusion. She allowed the case to drag on for over a year, a protracted, agonizing legal skirmish. Her strategy, transparent in its desperation, was to exhaust me financially, to wear me down with mounting legal fees, hoping I would simply abandon the pursuit of justice. What she failed to grasp, what she profoundly underestimated, was the silent, calculated brilliance of my chosen advocate. My lawyer, operating on a no-win, no-fee basis, felt no such financial pressure. Her resolve, fueled by the stark injustice of Eleanor's actions, was as unyielding as my own. Eleanor, on the other hand, was hemorrhaging money, her dwindling resources being systematically siphoned away by her own legal defense. The tables, once tilted in her favor, had now dramatically turned, transforming her initial financial dominance into a relentless, unavoidable drain. In the end, with the specter of a humiliating, public defeat looming large, Eleanor Vance capitulated. She settled out of court, an act of grudging surrender, a tacit admission of her guilt and the overwhelming strength of my case. The exact terms of the settlement, bound by confidentiality, cannot be disclosed. But rest assured, the financial restitution was substantial, a fitting recompense for years of dedicated service, for the calculated betrayal, and for the psychological toll of her malicious campaign. It was not merely compensation. It was a potent affirmation of value, a tangible declaration that some things, some people, cannot be cheaply dismissed. The aftermath of this protracted battle was a slow, inexorable cascade of consequences, a meticulous detailing of Eleanor Vance's permanent loss, painted with the stark brushstrokes of true justice. The office assistant, my loyal friend who had witnessed the full spectrum of Eleanor's callousness, remained for only a few months after my departure. She found the atmosphere unbearable, the air thick with distrust and resentment. She left, not in search of higher pay, but for the fundamental human right to work for an employer she could respect, an employer who valued honesty and integrity. Her departure was another small but significant wound in Eleanor's failing enterprise, a further erosion of the few remaining threads of loyalty. Word of my unfair dismissal spread, not through any malicious gossip from my end, but through the natural curiosity of our former clients. Several of them, discerning individuals who valued my expertise and personal approach, contacted me directly. Eleanor, in her characteristic deceit, had been telling them that I had simply quit. My direct, honest account, that I had been unfairly dismissed as a cost-cutting measure, immediately resonated with their own observations of the company's decline. They recognized the familiar patterns of penny-pinching and dwindling quality. The consequence was immediate and devastating for Eleanor. These valuable, long-standing clients, their trust irrevocably broken, moved their business elsewhere. The once thriving client roster, already decimated by Eleanor's miscalculations, now lay in shambles. The ripple effect continued. Several of these former clients, recognizing my unblemished reputation and exceptional skill set, extended generous job offers. One, a particularly forward-thinking firm, went so far as to offer me a part-time position with an immediate start, coupled with a commitment to fully fund my enrollment in a college degree program. The degree, they explained, was a prerequisite for a full-time, senior role they intended for me to step into upon graduation. It was an extraordinary gesture, a profound validation of my worth, a testament to the enduring power of quality and integrity. Ultimately, while deeply touched, I had to decline this particular offer, as the commute to their location was simply too prohibitive, and I was not yet ready to uproot my entire life. In the end, I found a new professional home, a role in an entirely different industry where the core competencies of problem-solving, meticulous project management, and empathetic communication proved to be highly transferable. I currently earn a significantly higher salary than I did under Eleanor, enjoying fewer hours, a more balanced life, and, most importantly, the profound satisfaction of working for owners who lead with integrity, respect, and a genuine commitment to quality. The sense of peace, of professional harmony, is immeasurable. As for Eleanor Vance's company, its trajectory continued its downward spiral, accelerating with grim predictability. The COVID-19 pandemic, a global cataclysm, exposed the profound fragility of her business model. Desperate for cash, she resorted to even more reprehensible tactics, canceling customer orders but flatly refusing to issue refunds, brazenly citing an act of God clause in her contracts. This final, egregious betrayal was the nail in the coffin of her public image. The business's Facebook and Google reviews plummeted, a digital avalanche of outrage and condemnation. The few remaining staff members, witnessing the terminal decline and the ethical bankruptcy of their employer, abandoned ship. The business, once a thriving enterprise, is now a desolate husk, barely clinging to solvency, a grim monument to avarice and incompetence. My narrative, the quiet unfolding of my justice, is now complete. It is a story not of explosive confrontation, but of measured defiance, not of loud declarations, but of silent, strategic dismantling. It is a testament to the immutable power of knowing one's rights, to the unwavering strength found in meticulous preparation, and to the quiet, enduring force of integrity against the bluster of deceit. Never underestimate the quiet ones, those who observe, who analyze, who gather their strength in silence. For when their moment comes, when the scales of justice demand rebalancing, their retribution is often delivered not with a shout, but with the devastating precision of a carefully aimed blow, leaving behind only the cold, unyielding truth of their vindication. And in the hushed aftermath, all that remains is the profound, undeniable silence of absolute ruin.